Good evening, everybody, and welcome along to this edition of LiR Confidential on lirmedia.tv. We have an email which you can use. It's info@lirmedia.tv to make any comments you like. We welcome all of them and we censor none of them. We just put in the usual bleeps into most of them anyway. Now, we have a few more people coming in later on, but for this beginning of the segment, we have Mr. Ray Bassett from Dublin, former ambassador to Canada, Jamaica, and the Bahamas. Is that right, Ray?
That's true.
And Theresa O'Donoghue, all the way from, is it North Clare you're residing in now, Theresa?
Yes.
Not very far away. A Clare woman like myself, my adopted county, and an environmental activist and advocate, and well able to advocate on behalf of green issues, because I've been following a lot of what you have to say, and it's been all positive. Now, Theresa, as I said, and we'll be joined later by John and someone as Martin, I think, if they can tear themselves away from the pub. No, I'm only sagging, lads. Now, Ray, we have an exclusive tonight on the programme. I know he won't mind me mentioning it. Ray Bassett, I know Ray for a while. He's been a great supporter of our little venture here in LiR Confidential, and for that, we are very grateful to you. You know, you took a lot of time out to appear with us when we were beginning and trying to emerge, I suppose, from the mist of not knowing who we were. But Ray has, I just reading recently that you decided to run for the vacant seat in Trinity College as vacated by Ivana Bassett, and run as an independent for the Shannon seat there in Trinity. And how does that work now?
Well, it's a very specific type of electorate, but what you need to get nominated by and proposed by 2 graduates, and you need 8 assenters, and then you put your name in, and you can stand, and that's the reason of standing. It's traditionally a very peculiar constituency, which has always returned a lot of kind of independently minded individuals, like Mary Robinson started there, Ivana Bassett started there, you know, David Norris started there. So it's essentially, it was put into the Constitution in 1937 to give a platform for people who would not normally come through the normal Dáil counter, and particularly people with minority views. But in recent years, the political parties have started coming in, and Ivana Bassett, for instance, was elected as an independent. Then Ivana joined the Labour Party. So that's the sort of background to it, Pat.
So you'll be conducting the campaign mainly by phone and post or whatever.
Yeah, there's no, because it doesn't have a geographic constituency. It has a constituency all over the world. Both it and the National University have votes for people abroad. So, for instance, and particularly with the Trinity one, there's a large proportion of the electors will be living overseas. And once you are a graduate and you're an Irish citizen, and if you keep up contact with the university, you will have that vote for the rest of your life. So it's all done essentially by mail and by email, and that you can't hold a meeting in the centre of the constituency. You may have a town hall meeting by Zoom, but you can't have a town hall meeting where your local constituents are there, you know.
And one thing I forgot to ask you before I bring Theresa in, do you have to be a graduate of Trinity to stand?
No, you don't have to be a graduate of Trinity to stand, but you have to be a graduate of Trinity
to
nominate and to propose.
Yeah. Now, I think you have your microphone off, Theresa, have you? Oh, yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure. Ray was talking about his
too much.
up and coming rise to power.
I was saying,
you know, I'm actually from Dublin. My dad is from Clare, so I'm not actually a Clare woman. Well, I am a Clare woman to a degree.
Oh, Ray, it's talking me out. Is this a plant now by Ray? You're a Dublin woman, is it?
No, well, you know, I could be in big trouble if there's people from Clare watching this.
But Theresa, so you don't have to be a graduate of Trinity College to run for the Shannon. You have to be nominated by 2 graduates.
Yes, and you have to get 8 more graduates to assent to your election. It's kind of it sounds medieval, and probably.
I know. Well, the Shannon or second or lower house. So people who are looking at this and don't understand, Dáil Éireann is the upper house and Shannon Éireann is the lower house. And there's 60 senators, I think. Is it?
I think it's 60 senators, yeah. And the Taoiseach has the right to nominate 11, I think. And then the universities do 6, and the rest are from essentially elected by the county councils and the members of the Oireachtas.
Yeah, county council for the industrial panel and the educational panel. Theresa, did you ever think of running for the Shannon?
No.
No.
Short and sweet.
No, I don't even know what way I would get into the Shannon. I went to college. I went to the National Rehabilitation College, which would be a totally different college to our academic major, as if though the people in academia have greater brain power or something. I don't know what it is. I'm actually gone back to university now. I've never been to academia ever.
Who are you?
Yeah, I've gone back to university to do a master's. I got a scholarship to do a master's.
Fantastic.
I find it very, what did you say, medieval, right? Even like bachelors and masters, and it's just like a bit of misogyny going on here and elitism.
Don't worry, they pick on Northsiders as well.
Oh God, yeah, I wouldn't blame them.
By the way, are you from the north side or south side, Theresa?
I'm south side. It's just as well we didn't. We'll be outbidding each other now.
Actually, we're getting into more and more murky waters here, but this is the program on LiR.TV. But Theresa, so you're going back to university. You obviously got a grant. My son has gone back lately now to finish a degree. He came back from Germany, from Berlin. So that's how I know about these things, the Susie grant and all of that.
Yeah, I didn't get the Susie grant. I got a NTL are sponsoring some people to do a climate change scholarship, and yes. I won that based on my voluntary work for the past 15 years. So,
and climate change, they talk about climate change and all of that. To me, it's probably my old age. You get more gravity as the older you get, but I cannot abide the appalling traffic in towns anymore. Is it me? I can't abide the consistent and persistent noise of traffic, continuous all day long. I was in Dublin for the All-Ireland semi-final on a Sunday in Dublin. I was there early in the morning at about 10 o'clock because we had another thing to do before I went to Croke Park. And the traffic rate, I know how you find, I know you live in Dublin. I can't stick it at all. Is it time to ban the private car out of big towns and cities?
It might be if the alternatives were there. I use the train all the time. I live. There's a train station about 10 minutes walk from me, and I'm in and out, and I've reached the age where they don't even charge me anymore. So I'd be mad not to use it. But I agree. I wrote about the Phoenix Park, and the Phoenix Park is a major arterial route now out of Dublin, and all those people who live beside it and want to see it much more a much wilder and more natural environment. It's very, very difficult because there are people there who are trying to go in every morning and earn their living, and it's very hard for me who's now kind of moved out of that position to sort of say to them, you can't use that, and you have to clog yourself up at a time when they still haven't built the necessary infrastructure, particularly in South County Meath and North County Dublin, to bring people in. I mean, I think most people would take the train if they got a chance, because nobody likes sitting in traffic, but they have to build the infrastructure to allow people to do that, first.
And public transport is only as good as it can move freely, and to me, it's a misnomer to have public transport and the private car taking up 2/3 of the space. That's only me. All the space in town, and expecting buses to be on time. You can't do it. I think they'll have to do something drastic, Theresa, like the smoking ban. It's stopping now on September the 1st, and that's it, and make it a law. All traffic, private cars are not coming into our cities anymore from 1st of June next year. They can use public transport, and that's it.
Well, I having left Dublin and move more and more rural. When
Yeah,
I moved to Kildare, I couldn't drive. I had to learn to drive in Kildare. So while you might not like the city public transport, it is a million times better than rural transport. And you might, I mean, I never drove in Dublin. I cycled everywhere, bus to everywhere. And a lot of that is because of my epilepsy. But
yeah.
because I was seizure free so long, I could learn to drive. So I think we need to take the cars off the road. It'll be a minor inconvenience for a while. And I mean, there's certain people who need to drive, maybe people with disabilities and things, but
Oh yeah,
uh,
there are exceptions. They'll be always fine.
they can all use the bus corridors.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I got the bus that Sunday from Limerick at 7:45 on the morning, Sunday morning, and I was above in West Walnut Street at 10:20, fresh for my journey and all, no problem, straight into town, bang. I think public transport is the way to go. We have to support it, lads. I know. Look, the system, as you said, Ray, the full infrastructure is there, but by God, if you took 70-80% of the cars, the private cars off the roads in Dublin City, yeah, I think more and more people would use public transport.
But there's capacity problems too, Pat. I mean, you try and get buses to some parts of Dublin, and you'd be waiting. You know, if you're in Blackhall Place and you're going to Blanchardstown, unless you're in the city centre, you won't get a bus. The vast majority of buses don't pass you. I mean, the sheer numbers. Remember that there is capacity problems on, and if you get into a train to Maynooth, if you're going out to Maynooth, it's almost like Japanese levels of
Yeah,
overcrowding. I mean, I don't know why they don't have double decker trains like they have in every other country, but there is huge capacity problems on it, and maybe we haven't been ambitious enough in doing it. But to move to it immediately, I think you'd have huge problems. I think you have
but
to plan these.
you know, Ray and Theresa, we've been talking about this. Everybody knows, even the dogs on the street knows at this stage that on a Friday evening in Dublin, or a Friday, all the students from the west of Ireland are going home. Everybody knows that. And for a public transport company like Ian O'Neill or Bassett that cannot put on extra stuff every single weekend of every year, the senior management in those companies should be fired.
I think we're going to start getting all these fines for not reaching our targets. And I think free public transport would be a major incentive for people to start getting out of their cars, and that would be a way of weaning them onto public transport. So if we even started with free public transport, even school transport, because our children don't know what it is to get a bus, but if they had free school buses, they'd all be on the bus.
They would, and they do that in Luxembourg. Our public transport in Luxembourg is free for everybody, and it's surely we can send one or two people over there. When you go into the Senate now, when you be a senator, you could go there on a fact-finding mission to Luxembourg and see how they do things. Because what's the population in Luxembourg? Would it be much the same as us?
About 600,000.
Well, small, but nevertheless, they have a system. To look at the system and extrapolate out, wouldn't take much to do it,
Absolutely. No, but as I say, you have to put the investment in, and
no, the program is LiR Confidential on LMedia.tv. Now, Theresa, I don't know whether you saw it and Ray during the week. I know I'm going to keep a straight face saying this, but we had yet another housing plan. It's the fourth in recent times from yet another new housing minister. I know, did you get to see, because I follow these things closely myself, being an ex-civil servant, I like to see these details. I don't know what to say other than, what did you hear did you look at any detail, Theresa, on this, or did you pay any attention to it?
First of all, I think we're all ex-civil servants.
no, exciting.
So, well, I left because of the system being so impossible to work in. I think the housing, we need to get strict on the privatization of housing and the high rental situation for people. They never get on the market. Everybody's probably waiting for the parents to die to get a house at this stage. And then where are our generations going? So they seem to be getting more ambitious towards social housing, but they did that in the Celtic Tiger just before that, and then they let the private companies take over and not bother with the social housing. So I think there might be ambition, but whether there's commitment is another thing.
And did you pay any attention to it, Ray, yourself?
I did a bit, but you know, there's a certain exhaustion factor. I mean, maybe it's after a few years, yet another plan which seems to be dust it down, put even higher targets up, and don't meet them. You know, that's the way. But I don't want to be cynical, but you wonder whether you need to do. I mean, again, we need to really massively improve the you know our own workforce. I mean, people are we don't encourage enough people obviously to do apprenticeships to, you know, the craft industry, the crafts, and we need to do a whole series of that. And it seems like, you know, government comes in and we say they want to press a wand and say everything's going to work, but these things work if they're planned long in advance, and if you do. But it's, you know, there'll be boom and bust. There'll be 4 billion put for this housing, and then next year the Minister for Finance will decide we need to cut back on this, or we need to move it somewhere else. So it's, and they tell you it's multi-annual commitments, but in reality, they can change in the morning. So you know, I wish Darragh O'Brien the very best, but you know, I'd be a bit cynical about whether it's going to actually make a huge difference. I'm sorry to say, my own kids are looking for houses in Dublin, so you know, I have a vested interest in it. You know.
You haven't a hope of prices. Now, when I read the plan, I read the synopsis, not all of it, of the new plan. I didn't see anything different between this and the last three, broadly speaking. Now, I didn't, in fairness, I'm not going to criticize something I haven't read in detail. I might get around to it sometime, but when I see a sentence, we're going to build private houses, we're going to build affordable houses, we're going to build social houses, we're going to build whatever, wigwams or whatever. I swear to God, the very minute that sentence is mentioned in the plan, it's dead in the water. What I think Ministers for Housing should do is simply build houses like they do in other countries, just houses, 3-bedroom, 4-bedroom, 2-bedroom, whatever, 1-bedroom. Build houses. If the three of us are looking then to go into houses in that scheme, for instance, Ray can afford to buy it, he go away and get a mortgage or buy his house. Theresa and myself, we can't afford, so we get a long-term 20-year lease on it, rental lease, and off we go. There's no difference. Houses are built for people and everybody is accommodated, and that'll be my opinion. But dividing people up, it's like segregation.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work.
It's just an apartheid approach to housing.
Well, my first house was actually Guinness's house. So back then, companies built the houses for their workers, and we don't even, you know, the corporate tax is abysmal. So it's not like that, you know, that leverage is there. It's not there. So while the businesses like that long-term lease, and then people could buy them eventually, it was nearly like hire purchase. That doesn't exist anymore, and the government is not filling that void.
That's true. That's true. My first house was done through the county council scheme, you know, where you got a mortgage for was it 30% or something like that, or 40%, and then you build up to buy the rest of it later on. Just so long ago now, it's back in 1980s, I forget. But getting back to the housing, there's 90,000 homes empty in the Republic of Ireland. That survey was done a couple of years ago, Ray. 90,000 houses empty. Now, a lot of them are owned by county councils and corporations. They should be brought into 90,000 houses.
Yeah.
That'll put a big dent in the needs of people, you know, particularly paying rents of two. How do people live in Dublin, Ray? $2.5 a month.
In fact, if you get a house, your housing costs go rapidly down because the rent is very much higher than the mortgages are. But some companies are leaving parts of the scheme empty deliberately. I mean, there are housing being built where they decide to leave about 15-20% of the units vacant in apartment blocks. Again, if there is no great desire for some people to bring rents down, the market is there's tremendous return for any company that now invests as not, particularly if they're a venture, if they're a vulture fund and that, and at the same time, independent landlords are leaving the market because of the tax is very, very high on them, and it's completely unfair that we're essentially turning over more and more of the housing stock to companies that really have no interest other than money out of it. The old days is sort of a paternalistic capitalism of where Guinnesses were probably the best example. That's all gone because companies, unless you're Google or something like that, and decide to get apartments for their employees, there's no interest anymore in employers doing that.
I know down here in Shannon, where I live, they had the Shannon Development Company, Swatco. They owned a lot of the houses in the town, and then of course the Clare County Council took them over, but a lot of them were bought from Shannon County Council, a lot of them, and they're still fine houses. They were fine houses. They were built initially for their, for the workers in the industrial estate and all of that, which is fantastic. And the same when my dad, when he was working in the sugar company, there was a scheme of houses by the sugar company. They were built, and there was that ethos of social concern displayed by big companies. But now you have huge multinationals who have no ties to this country. They have, I don't know, they make massive profits and no social dividend. No social dividend from those multinationals, which I think needs a whole new. What do you think, Theresa? I don't know what you think yourself about it. They need to deliver a social dividend in the country they're in.
Definitely. I mean, they get a lower corporate tax rate. It encourages them to come here. Then, and as bad as the vulture funds and these cuckoo funds, and they're not. There's no corporate social responsibility. I mean, Intel came here years ago to look for leak slip, as far as I know, and they wanted to make sure that their employees will be happy in the community where they lived. Why do they not care anymore? Why do other companies not care? Yeah. Is it just a dog eat dog world, and everybody spends their taxes propping up the rest of the country because the corporations don't pay any?
I saw a headline today, lads, we're talking about it. We're not picking on any billionaires particularly, but Bill and his wife, Mr. and Mrs. Gates, they bought a new house for $45 million. Excuse me, I'm choking. $45 million. Now, there's only the two of them, and they'll have to buying this $45 million house. I mean, do people not stand back and think, and we're not picking on them, there could be any billionaire. As I said, there should be a social dividend from the likes of Microsoft, IBM, Google, Facebook, all of them. No one individual like Bezos and all them should be allowed to accumulate wealth like that. It's immoral.
Really. And should anyone have a house worth more than a certain amount? I mean, there should be some sort of protocol within the country that says nobody should have a house for €5 million. That's insane,
Well, the way the economy works and the way companies work is that if a company showed far too much social interest, their shareholders particularly would start, asking questions. You see what happened in the banks in Ireland, that, when Anglo-Irish Bank started making huge profits, Bank of Ireland and Allied Irish Bank and those had to change because they were under such pressure. So, if there would be shareholders meeting and saying, why aren't you giving shareholders return? We need to, and the only way to stop that is international action, and where you actually, as Theresa said, give some social responsibility on it. But if you leave it as it is at the moment, the pressure will always be to sink to the bottom, because the people who are investing money will want a bigger return on it, and they will pressurize the management that they're not meeting the percentage return of other companies, and they will suddenly find themselves to be a hostile takeover, and some venture fund will take it over, which will drive it down. So the only way to stop that is both nationally and international cooperation and setting standards.
Yeah, and
it won't happen on its own.
And Theresa, what you think of the idea? I think that most, like, say we'll just pick Google. We're not picking any company to denigrate them or anything, just for illustration purposes. Let me be clear about that. Say Google. who are employing thousands of people in Ireland. Now, if all those employees were given shares in the company because it's by their sweat and blood that the company is making profits, if every employee was given a share in the company he and her were working in, wouldn't we have a better balance, Theresa? What do you think?
Possibly, but then we get problems with shares crashing and things like that. So there might be a better way of doing it. I think putting the money into the assets of the country would be a better way of doing it, and building the houses for society.
So as well as corporation tax, Ray, there's another issue for you when you're in the Senate. And well, as well as corporation tax, we're looking for a social dividend tax from the multinationals and the banks. There you are. I heard it first here.
I'm glad you're going to write it for me, Pat.
LiR Confidential is the program on LiRmedia.tv, and I know I'm looking down a lot of my phone, people, but I can't read them anymore now. They're too small, the writing. I'll have to get a bigger screen. info@lirmedia.tv is our email, and we're delighted to be joined tonight by Theresa O'Donoghue and Ray Bassett. Now, but I forgot to ask you, Theresa, what are you going studying actually studying?
Climate change, society, media, and policy.
Climate change, society, and media. There, Ray, another note for the new senator there. Climate change, media. I'd always say that. Climate change, media, and policy.
Policy, yeah.
And if the last time I got the train to Dublin, from Limerick to Dublin, I dare say anybody gets it up to Dublin. A few things struck me going up to Dublin and going back down the train again. The lads are with me. At each side of the train, as you look out, you have nothing at each side of it. Nothing, only cattle in the fields. There's something wrong with that. Something very, very wrong. Fundamentally wrong with agriculture when all you have in the fields are fattening cows.
Well, the burping is the problem. But there was in the past year, a report came out today that there was 118,000 extra cattle this year alone, when we're supposed to be trying to lower our emissions. And most of the lowering of emissions is creative accounting. And Tiag is saying, oh, this is working, and the seaweed is working. And we've no real way of knowing if that's true.
Well, you would, Ray. I don't know, you would, because the Common Agricultural Policy, the checks that are sent to farmers and people around, they have herd numbers. You can get those from the Department of Agriculture, and those herd numbers that correspond to actual numbers. You know, I think, I'm not au fait with all of this, but there's a suggestion around that the national herd in the Republic of Ireland should be reduced by 2/3. Ray, what do you think of measures like that? How far would they go in helping us to not to be penalised for our so-called targets?
They would, but there was a problem this year because a lot of the meat factories were actually running at much lower levels. So the amount of slaughtering this year was way down. A lot of my relations are farmers. I may add quickly. I think that, you know, it's going to be a massive problem, and there would be a degree of skepticism that any Irish government is going to cull the herd to anything like the extent that is there. There is long-term problems because obviously the consumption in meat has gone rapidly down, and there's a huge problem for Irish agriculture as a result of Brexit, in that we exported almost 280,000 tons of beef to Britain at the highest point. Britain is not going to be importing our beef in the future because we won't be able to compete with Australian, New Zealand, Argentinian beef. So I don't know what they're going to do with the beef. And the British have signed the first agreement with the Australians, and they're going to be phased in. But remember, half our beef goes to the United Kingdom, and it's almost, as I said, we won't be able to compete. So there's a huge problem about what's going to happen to our cattle and what we're going to do with them, because none of the returns for Irish agriculture is anything like outside. The United Kingdom always paid us by far in recent years the best price. So the national herd, it may have become partly redundant the way things are going, but I think it would be, as we would say in civil service, very courageous minister for you to go around and tell farmers to do that. Now, you may have to do it, but it'd be a brave minister who do it, and bravery among Irish ministers is not the number one defining feature of them, to be quite honest, you know.
But when
I
you
probably
look,
sound a negative, Pat.
yeah,
I have to sound positive on something.
no, I agree with you because but I'm just saying that when you look at climate change in the round, when you look at the world in the round, and the worst polluters, as we know, are China, India, United States, and Russia. They couldn't give a flying, and I want to use the word, about climate change. They're opening.
That's
Some
not
of them are opening coal mines. China is over in the continent of Africa doing the same practices that they do back home. They own, is it 33% of the ports, the most ports in the continent of Africa as we speak. What do you think, Theresa?
Yeah, well, things are changing across the world. I mean, there's more and more pressure being put on governments to change. There's not enough pressure being put on governments to change. Coming back to the national herd, I think that's a very what's that word? It's nationalizing the herd. It's nearly a romantic. And I coined a phrase at the first National Economic Dialogue in 2015 called the cattle bubble, because that's where we're heading. The housing bubble is becoming the cattle bubble. We're going to be left with all these cattle, and that's not going to be good.
No.
But that's our own. What we can do in Ireland, there's a lot more we need to do with data centers. So some countries are looking at not having data centers because we're becoming a carbon haven at this stage. So while other countries are trying to reduce their output of emissions, we're increasing it and we're becoming a carbon haven. I think, yes, we have to look across the whole globe. And I think countries are beginning to do that. I mean, COP26 is coming up now. And based on what they were doing before, they're reducing it as much as, you know.
I mean, you're right. I mean, things about the national herd, as Ray said there, I mean, you have to look at everything that's affected. You have the politics of it. You have the, you have the farms have to change. They can't change overnight. We know that. But we've been talking about it too long without doing anything. Now, the thing about climate change and all, plastics to me, there could be, the Minister for the Environment could put in a law the same as plastic bags and smoking. On the 1st of June next year, there'll be no plastic allowed in our supermarkets, our shops, wherever you go. No plastic. Could be done.
Well, they're bringing in a plan on single-use plastic. That ban is like, it has to be phased out within a year. Lidl today started a bring back policy. So next year, no, 2023, I think it is, Ireland will have a return policy like the deposit scheme we had for bottles. So all of our plastics and aluminium cans will go up in price about 20 cent, 10 to 20 cent, but then you'll get your money back when you bring it back, because it's 95% more efficient to recycle aluminium than it is to just create aluminium. And we know, and especially where we live, Pat, there's massive aluminium plants around us, and yeah, and they have a lot of
Coca-Cola recently. Coca-Cola were they had to shut down a good few plants. Not well, I wouldn't mind that myself personally speaking, but they had run out of cans for the Coca-Cola cans, aluminium cans. They've run out of them. There's a huge shortage. So there you go. I don't know. There's so many things that can be done. They might look. I think putting a carbon tax on the citizens is horrendous.
No, can't do that.
No, let me finish my point first. I'll park the car first, but no, I turn off the engine. But putting a carbon tax on people. There's a report by the ESRI, and as we know, the ESRI is a government-funded think tank, isn't that right? Am I right there? 90% of their work is for the government, so really, how independent are they? I don't know. But they said that a 30 euro carbon tax would reduce carbon emissions by 3.9%. Do you remember that?
Right. But there's no point.
I followed that closely. And really, it makes no sense.
they're putting the polluter pays is not happening. You know, it's like way down the chain. They want the polluter to pay, not where it's the upstream pollution is happening. And so me and you making a big effort to change everything. And this is what I've been doing for years, is making this big effort.
I do. I'm conscious of it now. Yeah.
Yeah, but if we then allow data centers to be 30% of our energy in need in by 2030,
Yeah.
what's that? It's cancelling out all the major efforts we were putting in personally. And that sickens me.
Well, you're right about the data centers. They're horrendous. I was reading about them recently. And also, our government, our county councils, and are some of the biggest polluters in the Republic. So, I mean, that's a vicious circle. You find, say Clare County Council or Dublin City Council, you find them millions and millions of euro. But where does the cost come back on? I mean, that's our money. You're finding them with our money. So it doesn't make. What do you think of all of this? The polluter pay raise, you know, as you say.
I'm not in favour of a carbon tax because I think it hurts the poorer elements of society. And then this idea that you make it up to wealth and welfare, I think is very bad, because it's really it's hurting sort of middle class and lower middle class people who are working all the time. And I think it's much more of a slogan. And I agree, Theresa, that you know, if the big items are never tackled, as is the data centers and things like that.
Yeah.
Now, but I do believe that, you know, we should, I know it's a bit of a cliche, we should think globally but act locally. We should do our efforts locally.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm very conscious that often the efforts that are being put together have a bad effect on society generally and will cause alienation. Like any country that I've been, particularly in Canada, where they introduce carbon tax, the government gets hammered because people sort of say, I'm paying extra here. And they know that, you know, there's one law for one people and another law for the other. So, you know, I putting a blanket carbon tax on, I wouldn't be in favor of it. I just think that it will hit the sort of struggling person, as I said, the coping classes. And it'll eventually turn green issues into very divisive, and you will get rise of populist people. So it's not good just to sort of say, I'm going to put a carbon tax, and what's more is then we'll give a few extra bob in social welfare or something. That defeats the whole purpose of it, you know?
I think Ray and Theresa and myself, the three of us would agree that the principle of carbon tax is a good one, but it has to be targeted specifically for, as Ray said, the big ticket items, you know, not the person who has to drive their children to school from 8 miles away with no public transport. They have no other choice.
Yeah.
You know, as you said, Ray, they would be the people that would be most affected by the blanket carbon tax. I know it's an easy way to introduce it, but a little bit of creative thinking and they could do a lot more, you know. But the principle is a good one, but it's the implementation and where it sticks. As you said, Ray, there, it'll always stick with the people who have no means of avoiding it or offsetting it for something, you know, the people with the low means and really not being able to cope. But Theresa, we agree with you with the carbon tax. These data centers, there isn't enough discussion about it either on the airwaves about it, you know. But LiR Confidential is the program, and before we close the program, it's on lirmedia.tv, and our email is info, and we're delighted to have Theresa O'Donoghue and Ray Bassett. And please, lads, Ray is running for the Senate. I know we can't help him, we can't vote for him, except to start printing off new degrees, you know, from Trinity College. You'd never know in the back rooms of County Clare. We can't help you, unfortunately. But WhatsApp was fined 250 million euro recently here by our data commissioner. I know when you're reading that story.
Yeah.
It sounded, on the face, it sounded very good and very harsh. But what should have happened to WhatsApp, in my opinion, it should have been closed down. It stole data by from our citizens and shared it. And whoever was responsible should be in jail. Because these fines mean nothing to multinationals, absolutely nothing. It's like, I go out and I kill you tonight, Ray, and I'm fined 50 quid. It's nothing. Well, that's a bad comparison. But I'm just saying,
Nothing happens, Ray, tonight.
what's
a witness?
what should there be in a criminal charges? They should be facing criminal sanction and also closed down in the Republic anyway. What do you think, Theresa?
Yeah, well, a lot of people don't recognize the consequences of that. I mean, we've all been getting these weird text messages recently and phone calls and things like that. A lot of that stems from our data being leaked.
Yeah.
And then this comes back to every time it's leaked, it goes somewhere else on a data center, and it's been accessed more and more and more, and that needs more and more space in the data centers. It's just the way our lives are being lived online now needs some sort of, I can't say scrutiny, but it needs to be looked at. And this abuse of, and apparently Ireland has one of the most lax GDPR, so our data protection is one of the most lax, so that we're hosting a lot of other countries' data here because they can't get into as much trouble by having it in Ireland because we allow breaches. Well, breaches that will be breached in another country, and then WhatsApp get fined, and that might be our way of wagging our finger at corporates. But yeah, definitely. But there's a lot of things happening in Ireland that should be people should be put in jail for, the blue collar crime, the white collar crimes. I mean,
But the WhatsApp one jumped out at me off the page, and I read the whole article because where are the Gardaí and the corporate enforcement people on this? The watchdogs. Where's the criminal charges? There's nothing in the article about it. I don't know how they're going to bring them later on. I don't know, Ray. Did you read the story yourself?
I read a bit of it, yeah. I should admit that I've done some work with Helen Dixon in her previous existence, and she was at the Department of Industry, and I mean, I always found her very, very good. There is, yeah, and there's no doubt everything says true, but there's also a subtext here between the EU and the Americans, and
yeah.
And there's also a subtext against Ireland within the EU. And when Helen Dixon proposed the 50 million, which was a massive fine, others had to come in and do it. So there's a bit of juxtaposition, and they're attacking Ireland, but they're attacking Ireland and sort of from a principle point of view. But what they're really trying to do is actually attract, make it more difficult for these high-tech companies in Ireland, which probably is a good idea. But if they got their hands on it, they would defend them with their lives. So there's a lot of the sort of when you hear the commissioner in Brussels, and she's getting very upset about this, there's also an element is that they want to build up their own companies, because these are all American companies, and it's a bit of sort of Brussels nationalism against America. And we unfortunately are caught in the middle, and we do have a reputation for being soft. But just be aware that there's a subtext here of people fighting tough wars, as well as being, in favor of the angels. Because I think they'd be every bit as bad if they got their hands on these companies, and they don't like these companies in Ireland, and they don't like these companies paying very large amounts of corporate tax in Ireland, relative for Ireland, but tiny for them. But I do think that companies like WhatsApp and all the big ones shouldn't be above the law, and they clearly are. And there's nothing as irritating getting all these phone calls from claiming they're Amazon and they're claiming they're from the banks, and there's been some fraudulent activity on your social welfare file, this sort of stuff, and that clearly is coming from leakage, and they have to be punished.
Yeah,
it probably won't become. It probably won't go to the courts until we start taking action against it. And who wants to do that? It's the crime has been committed against us and our data. So who's going to actually take the criminal offense? It kind of has to be us.
The government has a role in this.
They'll just say something to do with us. I mean, the data commissioner has done their job. Yeah, but the data commissioner has done their job, and then they probably leave it to us to bring criminal charges if we wanted to follow that. But who's going to do that?
Yeah, because we don't have, Ray, one anomaly in Ireland in the law is we don't have, like they have in the United States, class action suits.
Yes.
Three of us can't bring a class action for our data. You'd have to go individually. I'd have to go individually. We could be joined together in the but we can't bring what they call a class action. And I think companies like WhatsApp probably are aware of this. We're not saying they are. We're not saying they're the bad guy all the time. We're saying that if I was caught as a private citizen stealing your data and share it, where would I be? I certainly would not be walking around for long anyway, I dare say. But look, that's our views to judge as well. LiR Confidential is a program on LiRmedia.tv. Before we finish up, we put a little thing on the card there, your favourite film, or what film did you go to see? Theresa, you probably haven't been at the pictures, as they say down my way. You haven't been at the flicks for a while now, certainly in the last 12 months anyway.
Oh, I'm not a great one for pictures. Anything I tend to look at has something to do with climate change, or it's research for what I have to do. I think, or the kids, my life gets taken over. So I'll see a lot of Harry Potter and the Lord of the Rings and Disney as well, so you'd probably be bored listening to that.
The Lion King, like Kelly Harrington put it on the map again, our boxer who won gold, like Hakuna Matata. That was her phrase, it'll be all right, Hakuna Matata. She was quoting from the Lion King after her two victories. Ray, you didn't go to the flicks recently, did you?
No. One of my favourite film is the All Ireland final in 2011 with Dublin beat Kerry for the first time for the But my favourite film is Casablanca, because the hero is very flawed, like us all. He's not a clean-cut hero or anything like that. So
good old Rick.
Yeah, it's absolutely Rick. Play it again, Sam.
Yeah, that was 1947, I think, off the top of my head.
Yeah, it was kind of at the end of the war period,
Yeah.
I had to make him an American those days. You always made the hero American because the sales were so high in America. You made the hero American, So
you're looking well to be around to watch that when you were a kid,
You didn't realize I was in
it. That's like last century business.
That was Lauren Bacall. What's his name?
Yeah, and the chemistry between herself and Rick, that's what made it, because it was off-screen chemistry as well as on-screen. So the off-screen came to the other, so the sort of smouldering, I'm going to sound lyrical here, the smouldering stuff came across.
Well, I liked I'm a bit long in the tooth, so the one I go back to would be, I saw it on DVD first, was 12 Angry Men. And then there was a cinema in Washington Street in Cork City at the time called the Kino, Kino, one of those private non-chain cinemas. And they used to bring in a lot of black and white films. They had a black and white night. I know what night was on. And that's where I eventually got to see it on the big screen. There's 12 Angry Men. When you consider that film was made with probably 2 cameras in one room, that was it. But the actors in it, I know Theresa before your time again, Lee J. Cobb and
Henry Ford.
Ernest Borgnine, I don't know who else, there was a few more of them there that were there. It was just a fantastic film, I thought. Did you ever see it, Theresa?
I don't know, because of my epilepsy. I don't remember. I can watch the same film over and over and get the same laugh. And I like to watch comedy because I don't remember. There's no point in wasting my time.
I don't remember As Good as It Gets. You ever see that?
I think I did, but
you did. Nicholson and Helen Hunt.
Right.
Remember that?
You know what they did? Do you know what I love is when there's a film locally, you can go along to it and then have a cup of tea and talk to people. I'm not a big fan of sitting in a screen, not talking to anyone. So our local Environmentalist in Falter, after getting a big screen a few years ago, and they had an outdoor drive-through cinema over the last weekend. And I just thought that's such a community thing to do as opposed to the cinema. But not that I'm against cinemas, it's just I love to meet people.
It's a lovely idea, lovely atmosphere. Sit down, have a pint or a drink and watch the film as well, but at least chat a bit as well. Yes. But anyway, we put that on the cloud. But there was a recent compilation done with screenwriters and all those people in Hollywood, and they named off their 100 best films. We're not going to name them out, lads. Sorry about that now tonight, the 100 films. But number one, The Godfather came out as number one. That's the first one with Marlon Brando in it, you know. And the second, number two was The Wizard of Oz, and number three was Citizen Kane, The Shawshank Redemption, and Pulp Fiction all day. But then you can read it up yourselves for your own information. But it's been a blast, Ray and Theresa, and for taking your time out on a Saturday night. It was more than appreciated for us here in LiR Media. And Ray, we have to wish you the very best. And Theresa, we'll get cracking printing off those degrees over the weekend. Those Trinity College degrees for Ray. If they can do it in America, they can do it here.
It's like money. We print the money while we're printing the degrees.
But Ray, sincerely, we wish you the very best.
Thanks very much, Pat.
Yeah,
Thanks, Theresa.
You'll be up against with all their machinery, but who knows? Who knows? They're very independent-minded in Trinity College, don't they? They're showing that. And Theresa O'Donnell, we wish you well in your college, and we look forward to you advising the new senator when he gets in on climate action and climate change.
Reforming me. All the best.
Until we meet again, lads. Take care. Good evening.
See you, Ray.
Sound, Theresa. Sound, Ray.